You're probably wondering why I have this bag of ice here. It's because my mouth hurts, and I've been putting ice on my cheek to make it feel better. I need to go to the dentist. But I'm here to actually talk to you about video games. I think I'm the first person to ever do that. Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter, Uncharted, Last of Us. God, I look like I'm cross-eyed because I'm staring at myself and not at the actual camera lens. Video games. Who are they all made by? A little company called, oh, I don't know if you heard of them. They're called Naughty Dog. Pretty cool. Pretty cool if you ask me. But where are they from? Why Naughty Dog? I thought, why don't I dig a little bit deeper, because I've been playing a lot of their games the last 2 decades, and I thought I might as well go, well, where the fuck did they come from? We all know Naughty Dog, right? Makers of Uncharted, Last of Us, Jak and Daxter. But what about games like Way of the Warrior? You ever heard of Way of the Warrior? Me neither. I just found that out today. And my God, they got some explaining to do with that one. Why don't you just join me on this little expedition I call an expedition. Sit back, relax, get a big old jar of jelly beans or a whole bag of Funyuns, and just don't even eat them. Just open it and just don't even eat them. Just sit there and look at yourself and go, I have this open bag of Funyuns and I'm not even gonna eat them. How wasteful. You wasteful piece of shit. Let's start at the beginning. Now you're probably sitting there at your computer thinking, hey, why is this 23-year-old guy making this video about some video game developer? Well, it's obviously not because I'm totally out of money, I have no job, I share a room with a 16-year-old, 17-year-old actually, and I'm completely heartbroken, right? I was right the first time? Yeah. You are 16? Naughty Dog has always been one of those developers that I never really paid too much attention to, because when I was playing their games, I was a little kid and I didn't really understand, like, oh, there's a whole group of people that make this, it's not the same group of people that do? Well, no, it's not, little Johnny. It's a whole different group of people that make video games every time. Sometimes they're the same, like when they make a sequel or they make a new game, but it's not always the same. GTA guy is not same guy who make Crash Bandicoot, no. So Naughty Dog was founded in 1984 by Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, and it was actually known as Jam Software at the time. And while they were under the name Jam Software, they came out with 3 games. One in 1985 known as Math Jam, Ski Crazed in 1986, and Dream Zone in 1987. I'm gonna skip the first 2 just for the sake of skipping the first 2 because, well, I don't really care. So Dream Zone was released on the Apple II computer, Atari ST, DOS, and Amiga OS. It's a point-and-click RPG game with a lot of weird modalities into it. I was very stuck distraught when I saw the brother with the toy chest. And what is inside the toy chest, we'll never know. Unless you play the game. If you really want to dive deep and see what's in that boy's chest. I don't know if you want to go down that road, but I sure don't. Also, this game has a fucked up, scary looking ass game over screen. And this is just the beginning of scary game over screens for Naughty Dog. For whatever reason, they have some sort of fascination with just absolutely scaring the shit out of you when you have a game over sequence. Their next game would be Keith the Thief, made in 1989. Same on the DOS, the Apple II, and the Amiga OS. Same kind of a deal, it's a point-and-click RPG, but this time they went into the adventure realm of it, in the fantasy realm. And it seems like an okay title for the time, but these 2 games, Dream Zone, Keith the Thief, not really my forte, not my cup of tea. I have no interest of actually playing them because, well, they're point-and-click RPG games from the 80s. If I grew up with them and if I was around at the time, then I probably would have played them because that was just what was available, but yeah, not for me. Ring of Power, on the other hand, is a pretty somewhat modern interpretation of an RPG, or at least for the time, because it's very similar to Bard's Quest. Ring of Power was released in 1991 on the Sega Genesis, and it was actually published by EA, believe it or not. Granted, this game has a lot of potential to have a lot of things to do in it, because it's a pretty hefty RPG. It's just that mechanic of saving doesn't exist. So when you die, you start over from the beginning, like the beginning. So, yeah, that's probably going to be a no for me there on actually ever playing this game. Now, the next game, I'm actually very excited to actually try to get my hands on one of these. It's called Way of the Warrior. And Way of the Warrior was their take on the Mortal Kombat craze in the 90s. And my God, my absolute Christ, this game is horrifying. It was made in 1994 on the 3DO Interactive Multiplayer System. Yeah, I've never heard of that either. And it's apparently made by Panasonic. So, yeah, good luck trying to find one of those. The only time I remember 3DO was from Sarge's Heroes and all those other Army Men games that were on the original PlayStation. If you find one of these 3DO Interactive Multiplayer Systems, then you must be the king of all scavengers, because I have absolutely no fucking clue where to get one of these. You can probably find it online. But I guess the question also is, do I want to? No. So like I said, this game is an attempt to get into the Mortal Kombat craze that was flooded during the 90s. This whole weird, realistic, pixelated versions of people on a video game in a fighting formation. That was pretty goddamn cool, seeing like a pixelated version of yourself on an actual video game screen. I would want to do that, but with like me butt-ass naked. It was published by Vivendi Games and Universal Interactive. You'll hear that word Vivendi a lot coming up with the next couple games that come out. And also Rob fucking Zombie wrote the soundtrack, and every single song sounds the same. It's so fucking atrocious. I don't know what this craze was with the 90s and Rob Zombie and putting his music in a lot of games. Like, they did that for Twisted Metal 3, I remember. And that was actually, there were 2 songs in there that actually, like, were so distinctive enough from each other that they actually did sound different. But the problem is that Rob Zombie doesn't sound different in a lot of his songs. And especially in The Way of the Warrior, every single goddamn song sounds the same. So there's really no point to be like, hey, Rob Zombie helped me compose the music for this fighting game. Because then you'll just be like, oh, he made the same song 5 different times. And now we enter in the big boy, the big man himself. The flagship fucking title that would take Naughty Dog and actually put them on somewhat of a platform. I'm talking about, yep, that guy. Crash Bandicoot was released in 1996 for the PlayStation 1, and it was their little first attempt of a 3D platformer. And, again, Vivendi Games helped them publish it, also with Sony Interactive Entertainment. This really put Naughty Dog on the map as a contender for game developing. It even challenged the likes of Mario on the Nintendo 64 as a mascot for a console. Like, that was just not heard of. And then Microsoft would come in when the Xbox would be released in, 2000? 2001? I can't remember right off the top of my head, with the Master Chief. But that's not really a kid-friendly mascot. You got Mario who stomps on Goombas and saves the princess. And you got Crash Bandicoot who collects Wampa fruits and saves the girlfriend from the bad guy. And then you have Halo Master Chief who fucking guns down an entire civilization of aliens who are trying to commit genocide on the entire galaxy, but are unknowingly doing it because they don't really know the potential power of a Halo ring. But I'm getting off track here. Crash Bandicoot wasn't a flagship title for the PlayStation 4 when it came out, because it did come out in 1996, and the PlayStation 1 came out in 1994. But Crash Bandicoot was definitely one of those must-own titles, because there was a lot of games that came out with the PlayStation 1 at the time that were like flagship titles for the console. You got Ridge Racer, Tekken, Twisted Metal, Ace Combat, Wipeout, Destruction Derby, Rayman, and a Doom port. But this was like one of those first little IPs that Sony had that Naughty Dog made that really got the ball rolling for the actual start of a defining console. Crash Bandicoot 2 would come out in 1997, my birth year. Heyo. Cortex Strikes Back. Same publisher, same deal. It continues the Crash Bandicoot story of, what the fuck is he? A dingo? What the fuck is Crash?
He's a bandicoot.
Oh yeah, he's a bandicoot. That's why he's called Crash Bandicoot.
Yes, his name is Crash and he's a bandicoot.
That's so crazy.
I hate you.
That must mean that Dingo Dial...
Did you actually forget that?
That must mean that Dingo Dial is...
Did you actually forget that?
Stop attacking me. But in Crash Bandicoot 2, it continues the story of Crash beating Dr. Cortex to make sure that he and the evil mask Uka Uka don't gain power from the power crystals and take over the world. Then Crash Bandicoot Warped, which was the third and the last entry of the Crash Bandicoot series that Naughty Dog would publish in 1998. Same publisher, all that jazz. The only thing that I remember definitively of this game when I was a kid is the motorcycle part of this game and how absolutely fucking frustrating it was. And also when you're Coco and you're riding on the cat and you jump over stuff and you're riding in the castle. I remember that part distinctively as well with Crash Bandicoot Warped. The first two original Crash Bandicoot games I never personally played too much. It was always Crash Bandicoot Warped because that was just the one that we had when I was younger. And that motorcycle level was fucking atrocious. I hated it. I hated every moment of it. And I still hate it now, but I would still play it again. For whatever reason, the Crash Bandicoot games were just really like overtly challenging for no reason. And it was just because of like shitty camera placement and just like the fixed camera themselves. And just some of the controls were like really stiff, especially with using a D-pad. Like when they released the actual thumbstick controller for the PlayStation, it made it a whole lot easier to actually navigate the entirety of the game. But at the time, if you only had the D-pad controller, you were like, man, this game fucking sucks sometimes. Crash Team Racing would be Naughty Dog's attempt at really firing off on the kart racing genre because, well, the only one that I could think of at the time is Mario Kart. And everyone knew Mario Kart. Everyone was playing it. Everybody talked about it and knew about it. But then Crash Team Racing comes in and goes, hey, we can contend too. Crash Team Racing would come out in 1999. This is the first little spin-off that Naughty Dog did with the Crash series. But again, they would lose the rights to the actual Crash series, and this would be one of their last titles within the Crash universe. In my personal opinion, this was my ideal kart racing game because I had the PlayStation 1 at the time and I didn't have a Nintendo 64. So I never really played too much of Mario Kart, so that's just my spiel. Crash Team Racing was a lot more challenging and required a lot more control over things like the timing of your boosts rather than relying on items to secure a victory. There are items in Crash Team Racing that are super similar to Mario Kart, but the drifting and the boosting in compared to those games, if you were to do it side by side, you could see that it is a little bit more of a skill and a strategy to kind of time out your boosts that you do get. Mario Kart, you just boost to boost and you just drift to drift. Crash Team Racing was a lot more challenging and required a little bit more control over when you would time out your boosts rather than relying on items. While there are items in Crash Team Racing, I feel like it's more of an obligation to have them and use them in Mario Kart rather than Crash Team Racing because your boosts are a lot more definitive in Crash Team Racing than they are in Mario Kart. That's just my personal preference. If you want to comment at me and challenge me, I don't care. But let's move on to this next generation of consoles that we would see as the PlayStation 2. So the next IP that Naughty Dog would come out with for this new console would be Jak and Daxter. And this was their major transition title for that console. And this was their first, a little attempt here at open world platforming. And it released 1 year after the launch of the PlayStation 2, so again, it wasn't a flagship title, but it was one of those titles that really gave a good mascot, again, to this console. Some people argue that Ratchet and Clank are kind of the mascot, as at the time at least they were. I don't know what was with this crazy obsession with and titles like Jak and Daxter, fucking Ratchet and Clank, this and that, AIDS and syphilis. Whatever the reason was, there was a lot of them. I remember not playing this game too much as a kid because I was honestly genuinely horrified of the fucking game itself, like the monsters and everything. I was just too much of a little bitch to actually go and play throughout the entirety of the game. I got pretty far, I remember, but I don't have that game anymore and I really need to go back and play it. I also remember I was scared shitless of the lava part when you have to ride the speed bike over the lava. That shit, I don't know why. I don't know why I was such a bitch, and I still am now. That was horrifying that scared the absolute shit out of me. I just remember playing that game, but not really finishing it, but I played that game so fucking much as a kid. I just remember running around in the beginning area and just doing everything. Like, that was always just my little knack of what Jak and Daxter was to me. Then Jak and Daxter 2 would come out in 2003. I had no personal connection to this game, but all I remember from it was when I saw the commercials, I was like, oh shit, Jak has a gun now. And my mom wouldn't let me get it because Jak had a gun. And Jak 3 would come out in 2004, and again, I had no connection to this game because there's a gun, and Jak has a gun. And for whatever reason, those two games were just like, hey, fuck Daxter. Even though he's on the cover of the game, we're just like, yeah, fuck you. Fuck Daxter. Give Jak a gun. I still need to go back and actually play them. I'll probably pick them up on the PlayStation 4 here because they are actually available on there. I just myself haven't got myself around to playing them. What's really crazy about the Jak and Daxter games and the Crash Bandicoot games is that they all have the same composer, and that's Josh Mansell. The music in that game is always like, even like just like the entire vibe of both games, they're very like fixed around like this voodoo arc and just this mysticism and all that, and this like island kind of theme. Both of those games actually maintain that kind of consistency. That's why I kind of was drawn to Jak and Daxter a lot, because it had that familiar feel of Crash Bandicoot and the same kind of theme, and that's why I really liked them. But I never really got around to playing the rest of them because Jak has gun. Then Jak X Combat Racing. That's a very scary fucking version of Crash Team Racing, I would assume. I still have not played that game either, and they're still saying, you know, fuck Daxter campaign. I don't know why Naughty Dog was just like, hey, we're just kicking off the little fucking rat guy. He wasn't even a rat guy. He was an actual person, and then he gets cursed by the fucking the Dark Eco. Remember? He falls in the Dark Eco.
Yeah, I remember a person saying that so fucking vividly.
Yeah, because that's all he fucking said was just Dark Eco. You can't go across the lava lake because you don't have the car. So the Jak and Daxter series kind of led the PlayStation 2 era of Naughty Dog very hard. I wish that I had played those games a little bit more when I was younger so I could appreciate them more, but sadly, I haven't. While I still can right now, I probably would have appreciated them more when I was younger, but that's not going to stop me from actually going back and playing them. I'm definitely going to go back and try to play them because I'm a big boy now and I can play games with guns. And then we transition into the PlayStation 3 era of games and Naughty Dog's definitive era. The first Uncharted game would be released in 2007, and this, boy, I'll tell you what, this whole entire series is just such a great sense of adventure, and it's so worthy of the blockbuster, title that it has, because it's like you're playing a fucking Indiana Jones game, because while you're not actually Indiana Jones, it has that entirety and that vibe because you're Nathan Drake. These games were so goddamn consistent, and they made the idea of adventure a reality. Nathan Drake is that stoic, typical, lovable asshole that is portrayed so well by the voice talent of Nolan North and even like the motion capture that goes along with it. And such a memorable list of characters from Nate himself, Sully, Elena, Chloe, Lazarevich, aka Lazarus Bitch. Just a handful of characters that I can name off the top of my head. The gunplay for at least me on the PlayStation 4 remake with the Nathan Drake collection was phenomenal. I've heard that it was kind of hard and tricky to get the gunplay down because just the way that they had developed it at the time with the PlayStation. The settings and the location were so well detailed. The stories, they may not have been the greatest eye-catching stories, but it wasn't really about, the entirety of the plot. But it was more about the adventure of where they were going and the development of the characters themselves. Just the way that Uncharted 2 opens up with climbing through that fucking train My God. That was a good way to fucking open up an adventure game like that. Uncharted 1 and Uncharted 3, you know, if I had to actually compare, like if I had to rank the 3 games of them like on their own, I would say 2 is the best. I know this is going to be a little bit controversial, but 1 is the second best and then 3 is the worst. But I'm not saying that like that means that they're horrible. I just in 3 with the whole fucking climbing through the goddamn pirate area in the graveyard of the boat graveyard, I fucking wanted to actually go strangle a turtle and just resuscitate it and then love it back to health and then leave it in the middle of the desert. That's how mad I was. I did play these games in the Nathan Drake collection, which kind of makes me upset too, because I wish I had played these games on release and kind of grew up with them a little bit more. But I'm still glad that I was able to even actually play them and that I have the ability to play them. I'm really glad I have hands. You know, I don't think I would like life that much if I didn't actually have hands. So I'm very appreciative of having hands. Oh yeah, by the way, Jak and Daxter would come out with another game in 2009 on the PlayStation 3 and the PSP, and it's called The Last Frontier. I didn't know that until just today. I totally thought that there was just the 3 games, the racing game, and then that was it. And I guess they just felt bad for Daxter and put his name back in the title, but that was the last Jak and Daxter game that Naughty Dog would release. Now we get to the granddaddy of Naughty Dog's perfection, and that's The Last of Us Part 1, because there is 2 parts now. This game is just one of the cinematic backbones of storytelling in video games in general. Not only is the game just a heart-pounding, great example of a survival horror game, it has some of the deepest, well-rooted stories in a video game that just doesn't compare to a lot of other games out there. Maybe BioShock and the BioShock Infinite game and the DLCs that went along with it, the Burial at Sea DLCs, but just Last of Us on its own is such a dynamic story and just doesn't compare to a lot of other games out there. It's so gritty and real. No one ever really thought that the guys who came out with the kid-friendly games like Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter and Uncharted would come out with such a absolute fucking bleak and disturbing video game that was just so gritty and real that it was like honestly kind of horrifying to even play it sometimes. Most stories are happy throughout the entire story with little glints of sadness and despair. The Last of Us kind of flips that narrative, so it makes those happy, moments a lot more worth value because the entirety of the game is sadness and despair. The realism helps to bring so much more light to the entranced moments of clarity and enrichment between the characters. Just like the bond that Joel and Ellie share takes everybody by surprise, but it's not really unexpected. Knowing Joel's history as the game progresses, we can see that Joel is not really this kind of guy who wants to share his feelings because he's like, well, I have no heart and soul left because my daughter is dead and I don't want to have to, go through that again. So I'm just going to stick to my guns and just do what I do. And we're all surprised by how much it took to, see Ellie through Joel's eyes and see that he actually does care for her and she's not just cargo. But we all knew in the end that he would become the father that Ellie needed and Ellie would become the daughter that Joel wanted to have again. Because they have a genuine care for their safety. Even though they're pretty much assholes to each other for like the first half of the game, they still care for each other. The motion capture work of Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson enhances this relationship between the characters like tenfold. And this emotional role like shaped both of the actors in real life, and it really panned out and you could see that within the game, and it molded the game and made it so much fucking better. This game was originally supposed to be released on the PlayStation 4, but the developers just decided, hey, we're just going to make this the last release for the PlayStation 3 and then continue to work for other games on the next console. And the next year, they would come out with The Last of Us Left Behind, an expansion that would be released on the PlayStation 3 and also on the little remaster that they had of The Last of Us for the PlayStation 4. And the Left Behind expansion goes into the storytelling of Ellie and who she was before she met Joel and the relationship that she had and what she was doing before she met Joel. And we're able to see Ellie's perspective and just see more of who she is and what inspires her and what makes her Ellie that we see in the original Last of Us game. And then in 2016, we see Uncharted 4. This is the final conclusion to the Uncharted series. And we see the final conclusion of Nathan Drake. The last that we see of Nathan Drake, he's looking for the Iram of Pillars, which is the Atlantis of the Sands, in the southern Arabian Peninsula. And he's also going off to finally marrying Elena, the love of his life. And in the finale, we see Nathan Drake is finally done. He's like, hey, you know what? Fuck this treasure hunting shit. I'm out. He's living the life that he's always wanted. He has a nice house with Elena, and they're just hanging out, playing some Crash Bandicoot on their PlayStation. Why do they have a PlayStation 1 and not a PlayStation 3? Who the fuck knows?
How do you make it go?
However, Nathan's brother Sam, who was thought to be dead for a prolonged period of time, comes up and says, look, Nate, I got this trouble. This guy, he's trying to fadoodle me. And he's like, okay, I won't let them fadoodle you. So Nathan Drake and Sam must team up and try to stop the fadoodlers. We'll see some familiar faces pop up again, like Sully. You can't have an Uncharted game without Sully. But yet again, Nathan must don the role of a treasure hunter to ensure the safety of his brother. The amount of detail that Naughty Dog put in to the graphical portion of this game alone is absolutely fucking just stunning. It also had the gameplay to match that graphical notch, because yeah, you can have a game that looks nice, but if it doesn't play like a video game and isn't fun to play, then what the fuck is the point of playing the goddamn game in general, right? The amount of detail that Naughty Dog put into the graphics of this game alone is something to marvel at. It's one of the most well graphical put together games of the generation, and for the 2016 release for the time, yeah, Naughty Dog really met the expectations of what a next generation game should look like. The story, by all means, like the previous Uncharted games, is not really too much to revel about, but again, it's about the adventure, it's about the characters and their relationships to each other, and it's just about the fun of being a treasure hunter. Like, that's what makes Uncharted a great game, is that the story isn't always, going to keep you enthralled, but just the adventure of the characters themselves and them going on this quest to find this treasure, to save each other from the dastardly evil grip of doom, is what's going to keep you playing. The Lost Legacy would come out and be an expansion for the Uncharted game series, and this would take place after the events of Uncharted 4. We'll see Chloe come back from Uncharted 2, and then we'll also see Nadine come back from Uncharted 4, who was one of the antagonists of the game. And we'll also see Sam come in too.
Wow. Spectacular. No wonder the whole solar capital was ransacked.
So I'm kind of interested to see on what Sam does and how Chloe is and what Nadine has been doing ever since Uncharted 4 had ended. And now we get to probably one of Naughty Dog's, and they're probably their only controversial game that they had ever come out with. And this is from this year, in 2020. And that, of course, is The Way of the Warrior 2. I'm just kidding. That would be an absolute heartstopper. I want to play Way of the Warrior 2. The Last of Us Part 2 would come out in 2020, and this game had a lot of controversy behind it, just with the way that the story was brought out and done. And frankly, I do agree that there are some issues with the story of this game. I was kind of upset to see the way how it did play out, but I understand why it does play out, and I still do appreciate the game for what it is. It's a continuation of one of the greatest survivor horror games of all time. It still really pushes in that deep onset narrative, and it just takes it up to a fucking million with the depression and the bleakness of this game. This game is so fucking depressing, and it's so goddamn pretty. They're like, it's got Uncharted 4 graphics and fucking shitty, depressing story. The controversy of this game is just really dependent on who you ask. Like, people like me, I was satisfied with how the game played out and, you know, what the story was and what it meant to me. But I can understand where the frustration comes from, seeing how Neil Druckmann handled Joel and the interplaying between Ellie and Abby. When I played through the game, it made sense. I just would have rather preferred to have played as Ellie in the entirety of the game, rather than switching back and forth between her and Abby. I understand why you do need to play as Abby, because Neil Druckmann was very, like, distinctive, like, hey, yeah, you're supposed to feel like a piece of shit in this game. So yeah, Neil Druckmann, good job. You made me feel like a dick the entire time. I appreciate it. And this game isn't meant to be a happy game. The first game's not meant to be a happy game. You're supposed to see the downfall of Ellie and the consequences that Joel made, you know, of his decision in the first game of saving Ellie. While I think the character of Abby is important to understand, I just still would have rather have just been like, yeah, I'm just gonna play as Ellie, like, because I just want to see her more. Naughty Dog has been around for a long time, and I haven't really given them the appreciation that they deserve. I played a lot of their games as a child, and I didn't really think too much of them, like I was saying in the beginning. I began to realize their worth and their potential as I got older. I think they're considered probably one of the most well-respected developers in the entirety of the industry, and they set out to make great games, and they always do. Naughty Dog is a developer to revere and to refer to when talking about which games are the best, which developer holds nothing back. It's always astonishing to me to think that the creators of Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter, such lovable, great little kiddie games that were just like nothing to really take serious, just totally does a fucking 360 no scope off the fucking top of Rust, comes out with The Last of Us. That just always has been such a mind-blowing thing for me to see. So what's to come next to this titan of industry? You know, whether if it's a Last of Us 2 expansion, which I probably think is going to be the next thing, or maybe they'll just make an entirely new IP, which I hope will blow us away. Or hopefully they will release Way of the Warrior 2, keep the graphics, keep the characters, add some characters, but keep the graphics, and call it Way of the Warrior 2 Electric Boogaloo, and release it for the same 3DO console that no one has absolutely any fucking idea of what that is. Wow, that was a fun little spiel. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, because I absolutely enjoyed making this video. It's just distracting me from the entirety of my depressing life. So this has been a great experience for me. I hope it's been a great experience for you. If I've missed anything in any sort of details, please let me know, and let me know of what other things I should look into. If I should look into other developers, if I should look into the video games themselves, if I should look into finding out why the fuck isn't there at Jak 6? Fuck number 5, just go straight to 6. And also, why isn't there a Math Jam 2? I'm trying to jam out with some fucking math. I don't know math. Algebra. I'm gonna go hang myself now, so thank you for watching and sticking around. Please stick around. You'll see some more of me, trust me.
If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself. Everything I have found here, I'm not found by myself. Try and sometimes you'll succeed to make this man of me. All my stolen missing parts, I've no need for any more. 'Cause I believe, and I believe 'cause I can see our future days, days of you and me.